Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or should I say good evening. Welcome to an impromptu video. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everybody's doing fine, getting through the week well. I'm doing all right, thank you very much. I've had a exceedingly busy couple of weeks, well, a bit longer than that actually, coupled with a pretty rough, I hate to even use the word, so I won't, but you know, I wasn't feeling very well and all the rest of it for a while, and it seemed to linger. It always does. I think it's just the older you get, the more it tends to linger, I suppose. I'll give the old wives' tales the benefit of the doubt there and ignore my observations. Anyway, so I thought I'd bring this video to you because I was walking past this building site which is right outside my house here in Bournemouth, and you're seeing this a lot now where people, British people, or people who feel patriotic towards the British state are starting to show their colours a bit more. And I guess it's in, I won't say retaliation, but I suppose it's in response to a lot of mainstream think tanks who think that putting one of these up, in your own country by the way, is in some way, shape or form racist, or offensive in any way, shape or form, to be honest with you. I'm not being funny, but you know, let's stick to the history books for the moment. I'll always add the caveat that this is all according to the history books. That includes nation states and made up regions for the benefit of control. But yeah, you see more and more of this now, people going onto white kind of circle shaped roundabouts in the transport system and painting St. George crosses on them so it looks like an England flag and all the rest of it, because of course that's a story now that it's picking up and it's getting more and more traction, you know, as time goes by. So, you know, if you're to believe, if you want to believe the mainstream narrative, then what you're going to have to do is, believe that anybody who shows a flag of any sort is in any way, shape or form racist, and you've also got to believe that the country is being flooded over with people who don't belong here. And of course, neither of those two things are true. You know, I've been back and forth to England. Now I'm 52, and you know, I've been back and forth to England many times. From, you know, coming from a military family background and stuff, so I can always kind of sort of make the comparison between what it's like in the UK and what it's like in countries like Germany or wherever the British Army had their presence back in the day, right? And this stuff that's getting talked about right now is nothing new. You know, the whole purpose of it, this is just my opinion, and this is just by comparing my observations with what we're told, that's all, is to basically have people arguing and fighting to such a degree that the general public will eventually welcome any draconian measures that the state has to offer with open arms. It's that simple, right? You know, you create the issues in the first instance, you offer the options, and then you execute the solution. You know, it's a bit like how the mafia works in all these lovely movies that we always enjoy watching, right? And a famous sort of mafia trick, I guess, if you want to call it a trick, is that they'll go into a cafe or a bar or whatever, and they'll very politely tell the owner that as long as the owner pays them a percent of his takings every week, every month, whatever, you know, the cafe will be protected. Well, protected from what? Well, protected from the very people who you're paying the money to in the first place. So there is no need for it in the first place, is there? You know, if the people who are protecting you are the ones that you've got to pay money to stop them from harming you, Well, it's exactly the same principle. It's called extortion, right? And it's been going on since I can remember. I'm just walking up this road here. This road is called Trinity Road, and it's just off a place called Madeira Square. This is right next to Bournemouth Police Station, and it's right behind Lansdowne as well, so it's quite a busy part of town. To the left here we have, as well as of course these working vehicles, the Arts University. Bournemouth has a University of Art, and these are some of the digs. The Art University is the other end of town, by the way, but some of the digs for some of those students are here. I just thought I'd give you a bit of background on what I'm pointing my camera at while we're being oh so profound. So yeah, so getting back to my original point, excuse me, and I've had a conversation very recently, or I've heard an opinion very recently of a friend of mine, one of the very few I can truly call a friend, and he was showing his bewilderment as to why certain people in the community, and I'm not going to be naming any names or any examples here, not that anybody thinks they can click on, because one thing I detest more than ignorance are rumours, and they kind of go hand in hand, don't they? But he was saying to me that what is making him shake his head at the moment a little bit is the fact that certain people in the, let's say, awoken community, without trying to sound too cringeworthy, are kind of falling for the officialdom, whether it's all Brits are racist, stupid narrative, or whether it's Britain's being taken over by immigrants, stupid narrative, or whatever. Everybody seems to be looking at those news headlines and feeding it with their anxieties and their online opinionatings and all that sort of stuff. But of course their daily behaviours out in the streets with each other. Right, and we have a hotel just round the corner here. It's called the Roundhouse, I think. Well, it is a roundhouse. I'm just going to call it that, and I'm sure it's been called that at some point. And there are refugees at the moment housed in there, but I walk past it every day. There are certainly not queues and queues and queues of young men stood there trying to get phone numbers off young girls walking past or anything like that, like you see in those apocalyptic Instagram posts. I mean, I'm on Instagram, and you know, if I'm to believe what I'm seeing going via my screen there at times, you know, I'm expecting people speaking Arabic to be marching up my street anytime soon. You know, it's nonsense. It's total and utter nonsense. And this is my point. This is the crux of the matter here. You know, and this is why I look at what I look at when I do my research, when I look at, say, the old world, what we call the old world. In other words, evidence around us daily that the buildings weren't built when we were told they were built, that our history books basically are a total lie. In fact, we can be quite safe in the presumption that our civilization doesn't go back much further than 200 years proper. There are many reasons for that, and just looking at the 1800s and what went down in the 1800s gives a lot of it away anyway. Right, so the point I'm making there is people are believing a narrative that they themselves have no experience of, right? And it's the same people online posting all the same nonsense, and I'm seeing the same responses from people on Facebook or whatnot, who I, to a degree, do respect, having had dealings with them in the past regarding different topics, but to still be falling for this, if that's really what's happening, is for me a little bit worrying. It's nothing to do with being clever or anything like that. I saw through it 5 years ago when a certain event took place and everybody nodded and said how high, right? But yeah, so I just wanted to sort of bring that to you, that flag that's hoisted above the building site on my street. I don't see that very often. But then it went click with me in my mind, of course, having seen recent posts and stuff like that, and all this hoo-ha that's being kicked up, all this fuss that's being generated through immigration. Why is it just the men? Are they about to form an army and invade Britain from within, and all that nonsense? Total and utter nonsense. In fact, I've spoken to a couple of the people, by the way, just to round off that section of my video. I spoke to a couple of people who stood outside this roundhouse in Bournemouth just smoking their tobacco or whatever, and a couple of them told me that they arrived here in aeroplanes, right? So give that some thought. Anyway, of course you have to understand, and excuse me if the wind is getting a bit loud, I'm cupping my hands, so hopefully it's not too bad. But you have to understand that people have to first and foremost get a grip of the fact that nothing that the state does, or in the name of the state, that gets done in the name of the state, is done truly from the angle of for our benefit, right? Truly our benefit. Lots of things will be told will be for our benefit, hence they need to be introduced or installed, activated, executed, whatever. Plans, that is, and hardware and infrastructure, right? But yeah, it's I find that pretty dismaying, just to flip-flop back and forth here, that people who I thought were a little bit more astute and shrewd in their thinking and demonstrate good discernment would then go back to that and still invoke some of the mainstream narrative into their opinions, right? Media is in on all of this. And when I say media is in on all of this, I'm not talking about the local journalist who's just finished her apprenticeship. She's not going to know the bigger picture, or he, right? But higher up the ladder, editors and above them, well, they're connected on different levels that a lot of us aren't. And people have to understand that. And it's those levels where those guys meet up, that where they're connected elsewhere, that's where the decision-making processes really, really happen. Right? Just tilt the camera up. Don't like filming people. So it's I lost my trail of thought a couple of times there. It always happens when I'm hearing noises or see people. I'm trying to be a little bit subtle about it. Not because I'm worried about what I talk about. I'm not. I've spoke to many people who feel the same way on this as I do. You know. By the way, the same thing goes on in France. I've got contact there with people, friends who live in France, Germany, where my daughter lives, and I've also have other family members who live in Germany who I'm in regular contact with, etc., etc. It's the same stuff, yet again, going on all the time. The narrative is our country is being flooded, and with your own personal historical background, you should not be hoisting your flag. So here in the UK, it would be the George Cross or the Union flag. In Germany, for obvious mainstream historical reasons, it's never really been fashionable to hoist the flag. I know that from all my decades of living over there. However, if they have sporting occasions like football or whatever, and the German national team are playing, they'll be there with their flags. And why not? You're supporting your team from your homeland. I get all that. But to then have that sort of interference, or to have that sort of narrative pushed over the airwaves, should really be waking people up. And then it shouldn't be too difficult to add 2 and 2 together and connect that up with recent events and how you've been lied to there too, by the very same people who are telling you to believe this narrative now. Right? UK's been over flooded and all Brits are racist. Absolute nonsense. You know what? I worked at AFC Bournemouth Football Club, Bournemouth Football Club that is here, for years. And trust me, if we'd have gone in amongst the crowd with our colleagues, the amount of times we heard abusive and homophobic and racist or whatever comments being said, we would have been constantly turfing people out the ground and having them arrested all through the game. It would have been a constant, because constantly people say things that aren't deeply rooted racist or deeply rooted homophobic or deeply rooted anything. They're not meant to be offensive. They're just comments that are supposed to be a little bit sort of funny, a bit humorous, and with no intention to sort of offend, right? But we've got to a point now where you have to be so careful what you say. We haven't just got to that point now. This point has been creeping on us now for decades, right? Now, if you don't take a knee before a football game, the whole club stares at you as if you're some sort of, secret member of the Nazi party, which couldn't be further from the truth. And guess what? Now they're stopping doing taking the knee before every football game. Isn't that funny? Not that the players are seeing any sense, because they're all handled as well and they're all told what to do too. But yeah, I just wanted to, I went off on some tangents there a little bit, but I just wanted to explain that, and I quite like the idea of there being a national flag hoisted here or there, just to show a little bit of patriotism with a very soft small p, right? I don't mind that, just to give the stupid narrative a bit of counterbalance for people who walk out in the street and might be just thinking all hell's breaking loose in this country while they're watching their TV, but they can go out their door and actually see that there are real people out there who do care, who are aware, and who are just giving you a little reminder that, you know, you're not alone in your worries. But I wouldn't worry too much at all about any of it. Like everything else, you know, I could draw you up a list. A Russian invasion, a nuclear war, being hit by a meteorite, aliens knocking on your door, asking you for a cup of sugar, and so on and so on and so on. There's a huge list I could offer you up, and all of it has been presented to us in various different ways through the school, the education system, through media, you know, nowadays social media and all the rest of it. And that is all social engineering. That's why we're at where we're at right now. In the meantime, while everybody's getting upset with all of that, and homelessness gets decriminalised in British Parliament, which went over a lot of people's heads, unless you're working in the industry, obviously. You know, much a fuss about nothing on that sort of thing. But yet, in the background, bits and bobs getting done, laws being rewritten, bills being passed in Parliament. The magician's trick, isn't it? While you're messing around with one hand, something else is going on in the other. Anyway, I've waffled on way too much there, but I just wanted to mention those topics. Quite frankly, don't care whether people are of the same agreement, are of the same opinion or in agreement with me or not. Like I say, once you've reached a certain age in life and you've got a bit of a memory about you, you will know pretty quickly that all of what's going on now, or is going on right now in terms of narratives, right, to prep everybody for tighter times, has all been done before. It's all been said before. It's always the usual suspects that get mentioned to, you know, play their role in that narrative. The naughty, bad Russians, for example. Yeah. We're on the coast here, by the way. Did you see once a group of marauding foreigners running around looking for doors to break into? No. And I haven't since I've lived in Bournemouth. And I've been all around the south coast very often, and it's not the problem that it's made out to be. But like anybody who's been on a demo should know, and I'll just round off with this, you know, agent provocateurs and creating a fuss and an issue somewhere in some corner of the internet, or in this case, you know, amongst the public in general through your news media and stuff like that, is the way to go, isn't it? And you know, we've witnessed it ourselves in London on demos where absolutely peaceful, not even protests, but sort of educational interactions on the street started turning nasty because there were people placed and planted in there to create an issue, which this just triggers one side off to retaliate, and before you know it, you've got a whole group of people fighting over a whole load of nothing. And then those fighting pictures are the ones that then get spread around the media and published online and all the rest of it, right? That's then when you see old women being pushed over holding handbags and stuff like that. Right. Anyway, I hope that video, sorry about that, wasn't too much of a jumble, but it's the first one I've done in a while. I'm still not quite with it really, thinking straight properly, I'll be honest with you, but I wanted to do it really, and I keep saying this, but honestly, it's also a little bit for cathartic reasons for me, to get it off my chest and have a conversation with my piece of plastic that I'm holding in my right hand, right? Because let's face it, and I'm gonna, you know, I'll ask you this honest question, and I'll round the video off with this: how many people do you truly know in your life, hand on heart, you feel you can honestly talk to about anything at all and not have an inclination at all that that person would ever become judgmental? So you don't feel like you have to go on a defensive in any way, shape or form at all, where you can just be yourself and talk about the topics you want to. Give that some thought. How many people do you really know in your life that you can fall back on to be able to carry that simple task out of having a conversation about anything you want to? Yeah, I can count on one hand, and I've given it loads of thought. So that's when these sorts of videos for me become cathartic. Yeah, it's a bit like writing a no-send letter, right? I'm definitely rounding off now. But you know, if you want to address a person or an issue or something like that, sometimes a good way to psychologically sort of gain some control over a situation and get some, you know, a handle on it or whatever, and eventually closure, is to write a letter addressing that person, that issue that's creating the issue or whatever, but don't send it off. And then read it back, let's say a day later, or give it 2 days, and then see if you still want to send it. But it's a good way, not just to see if you don't want to send it, in other words, to give you the time to reconsider, but it's a good way for you to get it off your chest and out of your system. That's the first step in being able to deal with shenanigans of that kind. Anyway, right, that's it. Waffled on way too much, which I've said now also way too much. So I trust the Flow of Social was a good one on Tuesday. Like I said, I couldn't make it. Yeah, I'm not going to bother going into detail here because, to be honest with you, everybody's got their own issues or things going on, and I can't expect that people make space for mine too. But on that note, and I will see you all soon. Some of you sooner. I'm going to head to the cafe now and grab myself a latte because they're nice in there. The lattes, that is. People are awful, but the lattes are lovely. And then I'm going to smoke a cigarette, and then I'm going to go home. So, outside the Art University Bournemouth, or one of the buildings that belongs to that department, I won't repeat myself and just say to you all, ta-ta for now.